Alexander burned it, the Arabs conquered it, the Mongols nearly depopulated it. Every great empire in history tried to destroy Persian civilization, and every single one failed. Stranger still, most were slowly absorbed by the very culture they thought they'd buried. This is the story of a civilization that cannot be killed, and the invisible weapon that made it immortal. But that weapon may finally have an expiration date. A slab of limestone, carved with cuneiform, records a promise made nearly 4,200 years ago. The Elamite king and the Akkadian ruler Naram-Sin agreed to a peace that would outlast their armies. The fragments, radiocarbon dated to 2220 BCE, and unearthed from a palace archive, detail not just a truce, but a system: hostages exchanged, irrigation canals restored, and a mutual oath sealed in the language of empire. This is not legend. It is an artifact of bureaucracy, proof that the Iranian plateau was not a wilderness to be conquered, but a partner in the earliest international order. Over 1,000 years later, Cyrus the Great pressed his own words into clay. The Cyrus cylinder, found buried beneath the ruins of Babylon, declares, "I gathered the exiled peoples." 6 lines of Akkadian cuneiform announce a policy of return and restoration. Some call it the first declaration of human rights. Others a masterstroke of imperial propaganda. But the record is clear. Displaced communities came home, temples reopened, and local customs survived. Toraj Daryai calls this a proclamation of tolerance. But the real genius lies in its duality: moral restoration and political control, fused into one public act. Then comes the Royal Road. By 525 BCE, a courier could ride from Sardis to Susa, 2,500 kilometers, in 7 days, changing horses at relay stations marked by stone milestones. The Persepolis tablets list grain rations for couriers, copper shekels for roadwork, and payments for guards along the route. Herodotus marveled at the speed, and modern GIS confirms it. This was not just a highway for armies, but a channel for decrees, tribute, and news. Even the Greeks, locked in their own wars, feared Persian gold more than Persian swords. Silver shipments from Phrygia and Lydia, routed through this network, tipped the balance of the Peloponnesian War without a single Persian trireme setting sail. Before any conqueror set foot in Iran, the machinery of civilization was already humming. Treaties were archived, proclamations inscribed, roads paved for messengers and merchants. The evidence is not in myth, but in stone, clay, and the lines of ancient scripts. These were the systems every invader would inherit, and in time be changed by. Long before armies breached Iran's borders, a subtler force was already at work, a set of ideas so potent they outlasted every regime that tried to stamp them out. Zoroastrianism, shaped on the Iranian plateau, offered more than ritual or priesthood. It supplied a blueprint for persuasion, a gravitational pull that drew even the most determined conquerors into its orbit. The core of this blueprint lies in 4 doctrinal pillars. First is the concept of linear time. Unlike the endless cycles favored by older mythologies, the Zoroastrian Gathas, verses attributed to Zarathustra himself, describe a universe with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Yasna 28.9 speaks of a dawning world destined for renewal, not repetition. Second is cosmic dualism, a struggle not just between gods but between truth, embodied by Ahura Mazda, and the lie, personified as Angra Mainyu. Yasna 30:10 makes this battle explicit, dividing all existence into the righteous and the wicked. Third, the doctrine of judgment. Every soul, at death, faces the Chinvat Bridge, a crossing where deeds are weighed and destinies are set. Yasna 34:2 paints this moment with chilling clarity. The just pass into light, the unjust fall into shadow. Last comes the promise of a savior, the Saoshyant, who will remake the world at history's close, a motif found in Yasna 53:10 and echoed centuries later in distant scriptures. Mary Boyce, the leading historian of Zoroastrianism, traced how these ideas traveled. During the Babylonian exile, Jewish scribes encountered Persian officials and their language. Concepts of final judgment and messianic hope began to appear in Hebrew texts. Later, Christian and Islamic writers would adopt the linear timeline, the battle between good and evil, and the expectation of a world-renewing figure. The Gathic stanzas, filtered through exile and empire, became the silent script behind three world religions. This was the invisible architecture of Persian power, not a fortress, but a worldview. Not a sword, but a story that outlived every conqueror who thought victory meant erasure. Flames swept through Persepolis in 330 BCE, a deliberate act of erasure ordered by Alexander after his conquest. The fire layer, still visible in the ruins, was meant to announce the death of Persia's imperial order. But the story did not end in ashes. Within months, Alexander's court began to shift. Greek chroniclers, Arrian and Plutarch, record his adoption of Persian dress and the ritual of proskynesis, the courtly bow once reserved for the Achaemenid kings. Macedonian officers bristled at the gesture. To them, it was submission. To Alexander, it was authority, borrowed then worn as his own. Bilingual decrees from Susa and Babylon, inscribed in both Greek and Aramaic, reveal how the machinery of Persian administration kept humming beneath the new regime. The Seleucid dynasty, inheriting the eastern satrapies after Alexander's death, issued coins stamped with Achaemenid symbols and maintained a tax registry that mirrored Darius's old model. Pierre Briand calls this the paradox of conquest. The conqueror sets fire to the palace, then rebuilds his throne atop the same foundations. The result is not annihilation, but absorption, a cycle that would repeat, each time more deeply. After Nahavand fell in 642 CE, the last Sasanian emperor vanished into legend, and the Arab armies rode east. On paper, Persia was finished. Yet within a generation, the new rulers found themselves tangled in a net of Persian invention. The Abbasid caliphs, who claimed to speak for God, relied on land revenue surveys and tax registers copied from Sasanian models. The very language of administration, familiar words for land, office and law, remained Persian, only now written in Arabic script. The Barmakid family, once Buddhist custodians of Balkh, rose to become the viziers who managed the caliph's court and treasury. Surviving papyri from Baghdad's treasury detail their work: cadastral surveys, land lease contracts, and the first systematic tax assessments in the Islamic world. These documents are not relics. They are evidence of a Persian bureaucracy running the empire from within. At the Bait al-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom, Persian scholars translated Greek, Sanskrit, and Syriac texts not just into Arabic, but into New Persian. Scientific treatises, astronomical tables, and philosophical commentaries began to circulate in a language that would soon become the empire's lingua franca. Richard Fry, the great historian of Iran, called this the real conquest, not by the sword, but by the pen, the ledger, and the archive. The machinery of empire turned, and it spoke Persian. Baghdad's libraries drowned in the Tigris in 1258. Mongol riders counted bodies, not books. Chroniclers estimate as many as 200,000 dead in a single siege. Iran's cities shrank by half. For a moment, it looked as if the Mongols had accomplished what Alexander and the Arabs could not: total erasure. But then the pattern reversed itself with almost mathematical precision. Ghazan, the seventh Khan, stood before the crowds in Tabriz in 1295 and publicly declared his conversion to Islam. The language of his court shifted from Mongolian to Persian. The historian Rashid al-Din, once a Jewish convert to Islam, was commissioned to write the Jami al-Tawarikh, a universal history in Persian prose, illustrated with Chinese pigments and bound by Persian calligraphers. The book did not just record the world, it remade the Mongol memory in Persian terms. By the late 14th century, Timur, descendant of steppe warlords, summoned artisans to Samarkand. The city's blue domes, tiled with geometric stars, announced a new renaissance built on the bones of catastrophe. The same civilization that had been shattered by Mongol swords now dictated the taste of its conquerors, turning apocalypse into patronage and loss into a new golden age. On March 21, 1935, a terse circular left the Iranian Foreign Ministry. It instructed every embassy, every foreign newspaper, and every international agency that from now on, the country was to be called Iran, not Persia, in all official documents and publications. The order, issued under Reza Shah, was framed as a simple correction, nothing more than a matter of accuracy. But the effect was immediate and far-reaching. Within weeks, the Times of London and the New York Times both ran notices acknowledging the change. British diplomatic cables from May confirmed the shift was underway, with embassies updating their letterhead and maps. American State Department memos followed suit by summer's end. What vanished overnight was not the civilization itself, but the thread that linked the modern state to the ancient world in Western minds. The word Iran created a border in language, a line that made the old stories feel distant, even as the people and culture continued unchanged. The renaming did not erase the past, but it allowed outsiders to imagine a break that never truly happened. Across borders and time zones, Persian words still slip through firewalls and satellite beams. Over 60 million households tune into Persian language broadcasts, from Istanbul to Kabul, from Los Angeles to Mashhad. On YouTube, Persian videos draw more than 1 billion views each month. Nearly every Iranian owns a smartphone, 93% according to the ITU, and most of their data traffic flows in Persian. Diaspora news, memes, and poetry ripple across continents, linking a cultural zone that no conqueror ever managed to fence in. But the old, slow weapon, the patience to absorb outsiders over generations, faces a new kind of siege. The Iranian government blocks more than 3,000 foreign websites and runs a national intranet that corrals most online speech. Satellite channels must register in Tehran or risk blackouts. Schools mandate Persian textbooks, while minority languages fade from the curriculum. UNESCO reports show a sharp drop in non-Persian class enrollment, 12% in just 1 year. What happens when the world's oldest civilizational defense, cultural absorption, meets firewalls, instant information, and borders that cannot be softened by time? The invisible weapon that outlasted empires now faces a test it was never designed for. The answer is not yet written. You now live in a world where cultural erasure is digital, instant, and relentless, far faster than any invading army. If Persia's invisible weapon was time, what defense remains when time itself is stripped away? The next conquest may not wait centuries to rewrite who survives. Think on that.